Hey there everybody, it's Mark Curley. I'm back with another how to draw video, or perhaps I should say a how to ink video. This is of course Inktober, the month during which everyone practices their inking skills, and heaven knows I need as much practice as anyone. I've decided to take the same drawing and ink it two different ways in the same video to compare. Now what I'm doing here is probably a little closer to my usual style. I've done this drawing, has a, sort of looks like an Iron Giant type of a vibe. And I guess what I'll do is, even before I get too much farther along with finishing it off, I'll show you the type of approach that I intend to use here. It's not exactly cross-hatching, but it involves sort of packing in a bunch of lines close together. And what we're going to see eventually is I'll be comparing this type of approach with a much more bold brushed black ink version over here, which is actually a very effective way of inking, although in my work I have not done it so often, this sort of super bold black high contrast type of illustration. So that's why I thought it would be sort of interesting, even just for me to challenge myself to work in a different way. But what you see me doing here is maybe a little more akin to what I'm used to, and that is to, you know, fill in with lines and sort of allow the way the lines fall to, in this case, suggest a stony surface and begin to maybe suggest some level of detail within the shadows. And you know, I've always been a little addicted to detail as an artist. If you look at my comics, illustrations I've done over the years, you almost always see some level of detail in the work. And of course, when you do a very bold black inking style, those areas of bold black are, you know, by their very nature not going to have a lot of detail because you've just done this solid type of black. So it is going to be sort of interesting to contrast the two. As I draw this sort of Iron Giant type of robot character, I did not actually plan out the details of the robot structure. And I guess what I'll do is just sort of jump in here and let's imagine that he's got those classic eyes, the glowing white eyes of the robot character. I suppose in a way what I'm showing you is that when you do pencils that you know are going to be inked, sometimes you may work out every single detail in advance. But you don't necessarily have to. It depends on what your style is. Like I'm sort of winging it here and beginning to suggest some sort of armor plate that goes across the chest. And you know, every artist has their own level of comfort with making up the inking stuff as they go compared to working it all out in advance. But of course, I do want this robot to appear to be in shadow, so in a way I'm not too uptight about the details because it's going to be largely obscured. And so maybe that's enough for now. I'm going to go ahead and kick it into time-lapse and continue working on this, and as I go, if I think of any other useful bits of advice that I could give in relation to this, I'll go ahead and hit the pause button and come back in. But let's go ahead and get some more of this done. Alright, so I thought I'd just jump in here and talk a little more. One thing that I noticed that I was doing just by instinct is that my line work tends to follow the direction of the surface, right? So here you see all these vertical lines. When I get down to the ground area, it also goes horizontal. And that's quite a traditional drawing technique, a way of hopefully suggesting the surface by way of the direction of the lines, you know, that it just sort of cooperates with the surface that you imagine would be there if you make all your lines right. If I made all my lines side to side, it would be fighting against that just a little bit. Again, not to say that, oh, you ought to do it this way. This is just one of many different ways. But I thought at this point I would mention, as I said, that my technique does, my inking technique does tend to involve a lot of detail, and that's why I thought I would stop at this point and let you see me sort of improvising some detailed line work here to give us a sense of the road that this kid is standing on. I haven't actually thought of a story here. Unfortunately, it looks like kind of an Iron Giant ripoff at this stage, frankly. But anyway, yeah, you're going to see me adding lots and lots of little lines here and there. And my plan over here is to do far less of that kind of thing, so as to, again, create a big contrast between these two approaches. And again, not to say that one is better than the other or that you should choose one or the other. Indeed, you can mix aspects of these two different inking styles that you see, and any number of other inking styles that are out there. Yeah, I just thought I'd jump in here real quick and mention that about the sort of directional aspect to the inking. And I'm going to go ahead and finish this one off now. By the way, what I'm using here is the Pigma Micron 08. That's my sort of inking pen of choice. Yeah, I'll go ahead and finish this all off in time-lapse, and then we'll be back to begin working on this drastically different inking approach over here. Alright, so there you go, and I have to admit I probably have almost gone overboard with the detail on this one, going a little farther than what I normally would do. It feels a bit cluttered, frankly, but I wanted to have maximum contrast with this other version over here, and I'm beginning, still using the ink pen just for now, to make the basic outline of this shape over here. I'm trying to keep it fairly similar to what we had in the earlier, in the drawing on the left there. But I'm going to go ahead and, once I get this in place, I'm going to stop and switch to using actual ink. This is, of course, Inktober. So I'm going to dip a brush in and ink in a way that I hardly ever do with this super black, completely solid black form of inking that I think is going to really make for quite a different approach. Now, I'm finding actually that this particular bottle of ink that I'm using might need a little bit of water in it. Give me a moment, I'm going to break because I think it's almost a little too thick at this stage. Alright, well hopefully that will improve things just a little. Yeah, it's flowing a little better. But I think you can see already, I mean, the main thing in terms of the production of these two different styles is that the linear style, that I did over there, just is much more time consuming. Whereas with this brush, I'm just able to fill this whole thing in a fraction of the time. So I would say that basically, excuse me, I'm leaving my chair to get a better angle on the brush here so that I don't go outside the lines. And the truth is that having this taped down, which is what I've done to keep it, perpetually right in frame of the video, having it taped down does present challenges for inking normally. I like to be free to sort of spin the page around as I get the optimal angle on the page with my brush. But I'm going to go ahead and switch back now to the ink to show you that I think a lot of these artists who work in this style don't force themselves to go 100% brush. they will allow a combination of the two tools. Using the ink for the outlines and for details, the ink pen I should say, and using the brush just for those big, bold, black areas. And I thought it would be fun actually to take a moment and show you some previous artists that I admire who work in this style, that is to say using very bold areas of black. And I'm going to show three different artists from, well, two of them from the earlier era of the 50s, 60s, I guess would be Jack Kirby, of course, with the great master of Marvel Comics fame. He used a lot of bold blacks in his illustrations. You're going to see that, and then we're going to move on to Neal Adams, who I admired a lot, especially when I was a kid. His illustrations of Batman and Superman I thought were the finest in a way, certainly of that era back in the 70s. And you're going to see some illustrations by him. He's not so much known for the big, bold, black areas, but you're going to see a couple of illustrations where he definitely is making use of bold areas of black to kind of make for an impressive visual image. And then finally, I think the real master of this style of our time is Mike Mignola. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, the creator of Hellboy. And he has a super distinctive style, and then in a way that this whole video was me thinking, boy, wouldn't it be fun to try to do an illustration that's a little bit like the way Mike Mignola does. That is to say, with these big, bold black areas of brushed ink. I'm pretty sure that's how Mike is doing those areas. But let's go ahead. I'm going to show you these several images just sort of spliced in here of three different artists, just to give you some inspiration of how these big, bold areas of black can make for some just stunning illustrations. Alright, so there you see three different artists working in quite drastically different styles, I'd say, but all of them sharing this use of these bold areas of black. And so I'm going to continue using their technique for this illustration, that is to say using this brushed black ink just to create solids. And I should say quickly, these days a lot of people are doing this stuff digitally, and arguably it's faster to work digitally. I would suspect you can even outline an area and then sort of select it with a magic wand tool, and boom, it's all black in an instant. You know me, I love to do things the old-fashioned way and to have an actual one-of-a-kind illustration at the end that I can give to someone as a gift or just put on the wall or whatever. But certainly I am a fan of the digital artwork that I see out there, and certainly if that is the way you work, hopefully this video applies to the digital realm as well. Just it's really mainly about the decisions of, you know, what is the balance between black and white in any one of your illustrations. Do you go solid black in, you know, areas of shadow like this, or do you prefer something more like this where there's a little bit of line work in there? I'm sure all of that applies just equally to digital work as it does to traditional style. So let's go ahead. I'm going to finish this up, finish up certainly the black inking part of it, and then maybe I'll come back and talk a little bit about how my approach differs in adding the remaining detail. Okay, so I've got the big bold black area of the illustration done, and then I thought I would just sort of quickly come back here and talk about how, you know, if I were working in this style, I might be inclined to keep these other parts of the drawing a little more simple and not go so crazy with the detail. Now, I don't mean to say that that's your only choice, that it's impossible to combine this kind of detail with this kind of black ink work. Far from it. You should feel free to do whatever looks good to you. But I thought for the purposes of this video especially, it'll be interesting to, if I didn't ink these areas in quite the same way, just use sort of a lighter touch all the way around. So I thought I'd just say a word about that. I don't know how much more there is to say. You know, it's as an artist, especially if you are like me, a little bit addicted to detail, the sort of the minimalist approach, the less is more approach, can be challenging in a funny way. I mean, of course, it's not more time-consuming, but you have to sort of force yourself to hold back and not fill every last square inch with detail, if indeed that's what you've gotten used to doing. Then again, for some people, it just the minimalist approach comes very naturally. So anyway, here's one example of where you know, here I had used lines for his pants. This is an area where I would just go ahead and blacken that all in so as to make it consistent with the style that I'm using over here. But yeah, there you go. I think that's about enough about that. I'm going to go ahead and finish inking this all in, and I'll be back with a few final words. All right, well, there you see the two different illustrations, the two different inking styles compared side by side. It'll be interesting to read the comments and see what people think of these two different methods. Of course, there are not just two methods. There's 1,000 different methods of inking this illustration, but I thought these two provided an interesting contrast. Let me know what you thought of this video. I'd be happy to do more like it in the future. But for now, I want to say thank you to anyone who has supported me by getting any of my books, like Mastering Manga, my book on how to draw in a manga style. We've got The Drawing Lesson, a graphic novel that teaches you how to draw, and The Realism Challenge, my book on hyper-realistic illustrations. I really am always so very grateful to anyone who chooses to support me by ordering any of those books. But I think it's time for me to lay down this pen. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back with another one real soon.